Hey everybody, lesson 2 of week 1. Again, we're in review week here. So just getting used to using all of the different platforms that we have and downloading the forms on Weebly or the handouts, getting used to the website and the Google Forms. So again, big review week. Today's lesson is that as well. We'll be reviewing um, latitude and longitude in the global grid. If you remember back to the lesson 1 that Mr. Foster did, he really focused in on the 5 themes of geography, and we thought about Mr. Help and how that helps us study geography and study social studies overall. So with that, we're going to look at one of the components of the 5 themes, that being location. So we're thinking about the L in Mr. Help and looking at location. We're going to review absolute versus relative location really briefly. And then the majority of our lesson will be looking at latitude and longitude, the global grid, and we'll finish off with some climate zones. So your agenda for today, we'll read the big idea card out loud, we'll read our word cards out loud, and we'll go through each one of those. And then you guys are going to have an opportunity to draw out the latitude and longitude lines, and we'll talk a bit about how those lines are constructed on our globe and what they do for us. And then we'll end the lesson today looking at the climate zones and thinking about how latitude lines can help shape different climate zones for us. Don't forget about the assessment on our Google Forms. There will be some questions based on this lesson on there for you guys to answer. Also, on our Weebly, there's an extension for you guys with the climate zones that you can get and you can print out if you have a printer, or you can draw it out on just a regular sheet of paper. It'll ask you to color the climate zones, label the climate zones, and just help you kind of solidify your understanding of those climate zones. So let's get after it here. Alrighty, so what we need for the lesson today is the handout from our Weebly. It comes in either a Word document or a PDF document. It is titled Review Lesson 2 or Lesson 2 Review. We're looking at latitude, longitude, and the climate zone. So you can click on either link to download it to your computer. If you've got a printer at home, great, go ahead and print it out and you can do the activities right from the handout. If you don't have a printer at home, no worries, just grab a couple pieces of paper, whether they're lined paper, unlined paper, doesn't really matter. Make sure you have a pen or a pencil and you can still follow along the activities with us and get those completed. The front page is just the title page of the lesson. Page 2 is our big idea card. Page 3 and 4 are our word cards. And then page 5 is latitude, longitude, and the global grid. And the last page in the handout is our climate zone. So make sure we have either those printed out or some paper that you can draw stuff in and complete the activities. Let's start out with the big idea card. So big ideas of lesson 2. Please follow along as I read each of the bullet points. Bullet point 1. Maps are geographic representations of the Earth. They're an essential tool in geographic inquiry. And remember, early on in the school year, we did a lot of work with maps, getting a better understanding of the geography around us, the geography around the world. And we looked at maps as a tool that geographers use to help us answer specific geographic questions or do geographic inquiry, right? Bullet point 2. The equator is a line of latitude that circles the Earth halfway between the North and South poles. So the equator is the major line of latitude that we'll look at. Sometimes you might hear it referred to as the major line of demarcation or a major line of demarcation, that demarcation being 0 degrees latitude. Bullet point 3. The prime meridian is a line of longitude that runs from the North Pole to the South Pole through Greenwich, England. So while our equator is this major line of latitude, our prime meridian is the major line of longitude. And we use the equator and the prime meridian to create our global grid axis, which we'll look at in a little bit. Bullet point 4. Lines of latitude and lines of longitude create a grid system on the Earth, and that's that global grid that I just mentioned a second ago, right? When you put all of these lines of latitude and longitude together and they stem out from the equator or the prime meridian, they're creating this grid system on Earth. Bullet point 5. We can use this grid system to find the absolute or exact location of a place on Earth. Bullet point 6, latitude affects the climate of an area. And we'll talk about climate zones a little bit later on in the lesson here. And then our last bullet point 7, lines of latitude divide the Earth into 3 regions: polar, tropical, and temperate. And again, those regions that we're looking at right there, that's your climate zone region. Please go ahead and if you've printed the paper, flip over to your word cards or just follow along on the screen. So I'm going to read these out loud as well. Please follow along with me. Number 7, relative location, where a place is located in relation to other places. Example of relative location: the United States is located north of the country of Mexico. Relative location is one of those things that we use all the time in life. If your friend asks you where your house is, you might give them your address, which that would be absolute location, but you sure won't be giving them the coordinates or the GPS coordinates of your house address. Likewise, if someone says, hey, meet me at Big B, and you say, where's Big B? Well, they might respond to you by saying, oh, well, Big B's, across the street from the park, located behind a row of pine trees. So we've used the park and the pine trees to tell us how to find Big B. That would be using relative location, using things around the place to help us find it. Exact opposite of that is word card number 8, absolute location. This is the specific location of a place or exact location of a place. Example, we can find the absolute location of a place by using latitude and longitude lines on the globe. So latitude and longitude lines on the globe help us determine our absolute location. If you've ever pulled up Google Maps or Google Earth or the GPS in your phone or car, that's using absolute location and latitude and longitude within absolute location to help determine where you are or where you're going. An even easier example of absolute location would just be the address of your house, right? That is an exact location, and no two addresses are alike, okay? Word card number 9, equator. The line of latitude that circles Earth halfway between the North and South poles. Example, the equator marks 0 degrees latitude. So again, like I was saying before, the equator is that major line of latitude. It runs right down the middle of our globe horizontally, and it's marked 0 degrees. So we can't say the equator is 0 degrees north or 0 degrees south, right? It's just 0 degrees. Stemming off of the equator is number 10, word card 10, lines of latitude. Imaginary lines that show distances north or south of the equator. Example, lines of latitude are also called parallels because they run east and west, or horizontal, and are parallel to one another. Number 11, the prime meridian. The line of longitude that runs from the North Pole to the South Pole through Greenwich, England. Example, the prime meridian marks 0 degrees longitude. So just like our equator being the line of latitude that's at 0 degrees, the prime meridian is the line of longitude at 0 degrees. And again, stemming from that, we have lines of longitude, which is word card number 12. These are imaginary lines that show distances east or west of the prime meridian. So these lines run vertical on our globe, right? And they're measuring distances east and west of the prime meridian. An example would be lines of longitude are called meridians and run from the North Pole to the South Pole. Here's the catch, guys, right? Equator, lines of latitude, parallel lines, they never intersect, okay? Where our longitude lines are going to intersect at the north and south poles. So we can't call them parallels because they actually do intersect at the poles. Our last word card, number 13, the global grid, an imaginary grid on the world created by the intersection of lines of latitude and lines of longitude. Example, the global grid allows us to find the exact location of any point on Earth. So when we take our lines of latitude and we put them on the Earth with our lines of longitude, it creates a grid, and we can use that grid to find absolute location. So now that we've got the background vocabulary ready to roll, please either open your handouts if you've printed them out to the first PowerPoint notes page, one page, which looks like this, latitude, longitude, and the global grid. Or if you don't have a printout of it, completely fine. Again, just grab a piece of paper and please draw 3 circles on it. Label one of those circles latitude, one of those circles longitude, and one of those circles the global grid. You'll want each of these circles to be big enough that you can draw inside of them. So let's go ahead and get started with our latitude circle first. On this circle, please label North Pole and South Pole, or NP, SP, at the top and bottom of the circle. And go ahead and draw your equator right through the middle horizontally of your latitude circle. Please, to the left, label equator 0 degrees. Now remember, it can't be 0 degrees north or 0 degrees south because the equator is the major line of demarcation and we can't have a 0 degree north or south. However, this equator does act like a mirror for us with our other latitude lines. So whatever we have north of the equator, let's say 30 degrees north, we'd mirror that over the equator to 30 degrees south. 60 degrees north, 60 degrees south. So go ahead and draw these lines in, label them please as well. I'll put a 2-minute timer up here so you guys can have some time to get this in. So now that we've got our latitude circle labeled, let's go ahead and move down to our longitude circle, so the second circle on your sheet. Please start off with our NP and SP right away at the top and bottom of the circle, signifying the North Pole and South Pole. Go ahead and also draw your vertical line right down the middle of the circle and label that our prime meridian. This is 0 degrees longitude, so it's neither 0 degrees west or 0 degrees east. However, just like the equator, it does act like a mirror for our longitude lines. So whatever we've got west, for example, 30 degrees, we would also draw in east. Notice, however, these lines come together at the poles. So these are not parallel lines, right? They're converging on the poles with one another. Our next set of lines is 60 degrees west, 60 degrees east, so go ahead and draw those in as well. Now, the big difference here, like I said, with our longitude lines is that they are not parallel. So they do intersect, and the intersection comes at the poles. As we continue to move west or east from the prime meridian, our numbers of degrees get bigger until we hit our 180 degree mark. So taking a look at this image here, we talk about that 180 degree mark. You guys can see that our prime meridian is the black line in the middle. That's also our 180 degree line. That's labeled 0 degrees. The lines that are red are our west longitude lines, and the lines that are blue are our east longitude lines. Now, we talked about these lines coming together at the poles. So the prime meridian is not 0 degrees all the way around the Earth, but we talk about this 180-degree line. That's the other side of the prime meridian because we have this convergence at the poles. Okay, so let's get back to this longitude circle then. I'll give you guys another 2 minutes to get this labeled, and then we'll move on to our global grid. Let's go ahead and move on to our third circle, the global grid. Go ahead and label NP and SP again at the top and bottom of the circle. There are no other labels here for this circle, so all you got to do is draw in your latitude and longitude lines. As you're doing this, notice that it makes what looks like a graph or a grid or graph paper. With the intersections of these lines, this is what we use to find absolute location. So again, like I said earlier in the lesson, the GPSs in your cars or on your phones, or if you hop on Google Earth, or maybe ask Siri to take you somewhere on Google Maps, right? All of that uses this global grid to pinpoint your location and get you to where you'd like to go. Okay, so we're moving into the second part of our lesson here, looking at latitude and climate. If you printed out a handout, please go ahead and flip to the next page. It's titled PowerPoint Notes, page 2, Latitude and Climate Zones. It looks like this. Otherwise, grab a second piece of paper, again, whether it's lined or blank, it doesn't matter, and draw a big circle, a circle big enough to fit labels on the outside as well as some labels on the inside of the circle. If you are drawing in your own circle, go ahead and pause the video here and take this time to copy the circle on the screen. Make sure you get the blanks on the left, all the labels, as well as where it says approximately or approx in the middle with some blank lines there as well for you to write on. Latitude and climate. So first, before we get going, we should probably define climate for ourselves. Climate is just simply the average weather conditions or weather patterns for a specific region or area over a long period of time. So whether area experiences mostly dry seasons or wet seasons or hot seasons or cold seasons or a mixture of all of that, we use that pattern to determine what the climate is. And what we notice with climate and our latitude lines is that there are certain lines that help us determine climate regions. So that region is predominantly hot, cold, or right in the middle. And we can go back to our big idea card and think about the polar, the temperate, and the tropical regions. Those are the climate zones that we'll be looking at today. So on your paper, this does not look like the paper for PowerPoint Notes page 2, but we're going to use this circle that we used for latitude to help label your PowerPoint Notes page 2 or the circle that you drew on the blank piece of paper. So the first thing that I would like you guys to label is the top line, Arctic Circle, and that is at approximately 66 degrees north latitude. So the line that we're looking at closest to the North Pole is in the Arctic, right? And we call that the Arctic Circle. And we have to remember that our lines of latitude are parallel. So we look at the equator again as a mirror, and whatever we see north of the equator, we also have south. Okay, so at 66 degrees south latitude, we would label the Antarctic Circle. This is the line of latitude that hovers around Antarctica, which is why we call it the Antarctic Circle. And it's the line of our climate zones closest to the South Pole. Now, the next two lines are a little bit closer to the equator. The first one we'll look at is north of the equator. It's labeled the Tropic of Cancer. Okay, so we're thinking about the tropics now, and that's at approximately 23 degrees north latitude. And again, we have our equator as the mirror, so whatever we have north, we're going to have south. Our tropic south of the equator is called the Tropic of Capricorn, and that is at approximately 23 degrees south latitude. So you can see here that these lines are helping us break up the Earth. And in breaking up the Earth, we find that the weather patterns within these lines or around these regions are relatively the same. I'll give you guys about 2 minutes to label your paper, and then we'll move on from there. Go ahead and put your pens and pencils down, whatever you're using to record with or to label with. I'm not going to ask you guys to label anything else for the rest of the lesson or color anything in just yet. There is an extension on our Weebly that you can either download and print out. It's the Climate Zone extension, or you can just copy it down on another piece of paper, draw it out, and color it in that way as well. All right, but for the rest of this lesson, just kind of hang out and follow along with me. So you can see the shaded areas on our circle here are north of the Arctic Circle and south of the Antarctic Circle, and they're shaded light blue. Okay, so these areas or regions or climate zones of the world are known as the polar climate zones. And again, our equator acts like a mirror. So because we've got the North Pole and South Pole on either sides of the equator, we have two polar regions. Okay, or polar climate zones. The weather patterns that we see here are cool to bitterly cold. It looks a lot like this, right? Pretty desolate, not a whole lot going on. In terms of human environment interaction, we see very little human environment interaction in the polar climate zones. Moving on from there, the next climate zone we're going to look at is shaded in yellow. That falls between the tropics, between the Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, and centers on the equator. So if we think about the equator and you think back to some of the elementary school stuff that you guys did, we know that the areas around the equator are hot, right? And we call this the tropical climate zone. Okay, and when we think of the tropics, we think of the nice sandy beaches, palm trees, okay, warm weather pretty much all the time. The last climate zone we're going to look at is the climate zone in between the Tropic of Cancer and Arctic Circle, and in between the Tropic of Capricorn and Antarctic Circle. So the green shaded area on your screen. This is the temperate climate zone. This is where we see hot summers, cold winters, and moderate spring and fall. This is where we here in the United States fall in. We are in the temperate climate zone. We also see most of the world's human environment interaction in the temperate climate zone. The temperate climate zone is ideal for farming and agriculture. So one of the things that I like to think about when we look at this is the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You know, we had the porridge, and one of the bowls of porridge was too hot, one of the bowls of porridge was too cold, and then one of the bowls of porridge was just right. And we think of the temperate climate zone as being that just right bowl of porridge, where, again, we see a lot of the world's agriculture and a lot of the world's human environment interaction. Temperate climate zone makes us think of things like this. Tons of different types of trees, farming, okay, ideal situations for raising livestock or domesticated animals and growing food. So when we put it all together and we put it on a map of the world, we can see that it fits pretty well, right? On this map, you can see the polar climate zones are shaded in pink, our temperate climate zones are shaded in yellow, and our tropical climate zones are shaded in green. Now, obviously, we know that these climate zones are not going to be perfectly shaded right up to the lines of latitude that they fit into. So that's why we say in the sheet that you guys labeled that the approximate latitude degrees, or the approximate degrees both north and south of the equator, are where we draw our climate zone lines. So again, an extension to this part of the lesson can be found on the Weebly under the extension link. This is the Global Grid and Climate Zones extension. Your directions here are to label the different latitude lines created by the global grid on the circle below. Label each line in black or blue ink and include the degree of latitude. You can put that degree right on the lines within the circle. That's no big deal there. After that, color the tropical climate zone red, the temperate climate zone yellow, and the polar climate zone blue. So to wrap things up here, right, we're talking about mostly absolute location within this lesson, okay? We've got lines of latitude. Remember, they run horizontal across our globe, and our major line of latitude is the equator. Plus lines of longitude, which run vertical across our globe, and they are not parallel, they converge at the poles. Our major line of longitude is the prime meridian, equals our global grid. Right? Our global grid is used to identify the absolute location of a place. The lines of latitude have an effect on climate. If you have any questions with the lesson or the handouts, please feel free to reach out to us via email. Our office hours are below each of our emails. Also, don't forget to answer the assessment or work on the assessment, the Google form. You can find that link again on our Weebly or on the menu that was sent out earlier this week from Mrs. Martin. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Looking forward to continue learning with you guys, and we'll see you all next week.